in your handout, but I got to address something else first, and it's about the brain or mind disconnect. If you're not familiar with this concept, it's hard to really explain because the brain and the mind are so closely related. But to really be effective at life, you want to separate them. I'm not saying they're separate. They may be, brain, mind. The way I look at it is this. Your brain is everything that you knew the minute you were born. Instinct. You knew how to avoid danger, find a nipple. We never forget that. And you know how to run all your systems inside your body, lungs, kidneys. There's a tremendous amount of knowledge in your brain. It's already, the pathways are already there. It just works. And it's instinct. But then we start learning things. And through our life, that's your mind. What I've been doing is realizing that the brain only wants to survive, reproduce, eat, and survive. It's your mind that wants to excel. It's your mind that wants to thrive. And here's the problem. There's a major disconnect between your mind and your brain. So let's look at the mind on this side first. If you want to excel, if you want to achieve things, you want a beautiful relationship, you want to be in shape, you want to make a lot of money, those are all things that require two things. Massive effort and risk. To get anything out of life of value, you have to take risk. And you have to understand that everything is risky. People are always talking about, I see people go, I'm risk adverse. Brother, you're life adverse because everything is risky. Asking that beautiful girl out, what is that? Risky. Going to the grocery store, risky. You could be rear-ended, paralyzed for the rest of your life. Everything is risky. Jim Rohn put it this way. You either take risk or you sit in the corner, you huddle in the corner, people protect you, they keep anything from happening to you. You can't go out of the corner because what? That's risk. And you live your life in the corner, not taking risk, living with mediocrity, just surviving. Not thriving, just surviving. How many of you really want to live that life? Nobody in the room. But how many of you have ever lived paycheck to paycheck? Don't raise your hand. How many of you have ever lived paycheck to paycheck? Do you realize that's just surviving? You're just doing enough to get by. That's your brain. So to achieve the results that we want, we have to put massive effort out and take risk. Now, this part is not theory. This part is based off science. You can look it up. You can Google it. Guess what your brain is? Effort minimizing and risk minimizing. Anybody see the disconnect? Your brain wants to avoid effort and avoid risk. But to achieve the results that you want from your life, what do you have to do? Put out massive effort and take risk. Your brain is your enemy. Now, why did the brain develop like this? I want you to go back 10,000 years. There's two cavemen, and there's two distinct brain types that are the dominant. There's the risk-minimizing brain, and then down here, there's still those of you who thrive on risk. You know who you are. You jump out of perfectly good airplanes. You know who you are. You love to scuba dive with sharks. You love to surf, skateboard, ride motorcycles at high speed in the rain. You love it. So you've got two different brains. You've got the risk-minimizing brain in the one caveman, and the other caveman is the risk taker. They come upon an apple tree at the top of a hill. And even from the bottom of the hill, you can see the apples at the top of the tree are big and fat and red and juicy. The apples at the bottom they're okay. The risk-minimizing caveman says, I'm gonna walk up the hill and get the apple off the bottom of the tree. But the risk-taking guy goes, man, I'm getting those red apples at the top of the tree. I'm gonna run up there and get those apples. So the risk brain runs to the top of the hill, runs, climbs the tree, gets the big juicy apples at the top of the tree, then climbs down the tree and runs down the hill. The risk minimizing walks up the hill, grabs the apple and walks back down. But there's a problem. When they get to the bottom of the hill together, there's someone waiting for them, a tiger. Both cavemen start running. Which caveman is the tiger going to catch? The tired one. The risk guy. He took the risk. He ran up the hill, he climbed the tree, he climbed back down. He's pooped. So do you see why the risk-minimizing brain survived and the risk brain didn't? They took the risk, they paid the price. The tiger got them. So that's why, as a rule, we evolved with a risk-minimizing brain. But do you see, in that environment, the risk-minimizing brain was a benefit. But how many of you have been chased by tigers lately? Bill has, of course. Do you see why your brain is actually your enemy? It wants to keep you from taking action. It wants to keep you from taking risk when everything of value in this life is on the other side of risk. You've got to take the risks. You've got to put out massive effort. And the only way to do that is to use your mind and sort of ignore your brain. Don't completely ignore it. But you've got to realize, I give a Saturday class, right? People pay $500 to come to this Saturday class. We have 70 appointments, only 50 show up. Pretty standard. What happened to those other 20? They woke up in the morning, they said, I'm going to the... Oh, you could just watch TV. There's a really good football game on. And they don't show up. Their brain got them. The 50 that make it to the seminar used what? Their mind. When you guys think about going to the gym, don't you say something like, well, I could skip it. Well, I'm kind of busy. There is something I could do, and you just make shit up that you can do instead of going to the gym. You don't go to the gym because your brain wants to effort minimize. If you make it to the gym, how did you get to the gym? What did you use? Your mind. So when I talk about personal responsibility, and we talk about, is 2024 going to be a good year or a bad year? It depends on you. You're going to use your mind or let your brain manipulate you. See, least effort, effort minimizing, is to blame. It's to say, well, we got the wrong president, so I can't succeed. My corporation made some bad decisions, so I can't succeed. My parents didn't love me enough, so I can't succeed. My school teachers, my college professors, it's their fault. See, the risk minimizing brain loves to hide behind blame, blaming outside factors. And as I said in the little brochure, I made money under George Bush Sr., Clinton, George Bush Jr., Trump, Obama, and even Biden, even though he's fighting me every step of the way. You can't let your brain make excuses for you. Every one of you has the potential to achieve everything you're thinking of, everything that you want. You have the potential to achieve it. But you've got to make that distinction that there are two different thought patterns in your head. One is your brain, one is your mind. And what I'm suggesting is that you listen to your mind more than you listen to your brain. If you do that, it's the only way to achieve the goals that you've set for yourself. Because that brain is going to push you to not do it, to not put out the effort, to not take the risk, and have fun. Risk is something you want to embrace. It's fun. It makes life worth living. A life full of adventure is what you're looking for. Again, back to Jim Rohn. If we put you in a corner and protect you, and you don't have to take any risks, you'll probably live to be 100. Who cares? I'd rather live to 60 in a life full of adventure and passion and excitement than live to 100 huddled in the corner. So, risk. So what am I saying? Take risks that will take you where you want to go and not the others. The key to it is to take only the risks that will take you where you want to go. The problem is most people are taking risks that won't take them where they want to go. The highest risk position you can be in is to have a job as your sole source of income. If you have a job as your sole source of income, you're in the highest risk position in the United States. Go back to 9/11. What happened to people with jobs? They got slaughtered. Go back to 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12. What happened to people with jobs during the Great Depression? They got slaughtered. What about during COVID? What happened to people with jobs? They got slaughtered. See, most people are taking risks. They don't even know it. This one almost makes me throw up in my mouth every time I say it. Guaranteed paycheck. Ever heard that? Man, I don't want to buy any real estate. I like a guaranteed paycheck. Fricking idiot. Is there such a thing as a guaranteed paycheck? No. And think about this deeply. Are you going to get fired? What's the answer? Yes. It may not be the first year, the 10th year, the 15th year, but on that 25th year, you're going to get fired. That job doesn't last forever. Remember, there is a target on your back in corporate America, and every year it gets bigger. Every time you get a promotion, what happens to that target? It gets bigger. Every time you get a raise, what happens to that target? It gets bigger. There's a target on your back. Corporate America's job is to be efficient. If it can hire somebody, sorry, this may be illegal, if they can hire somebody younger than you at less pay, what are they going to do? They're going to do it. They have to do it. Is their responsibility to you or the stockholder? Stockholder. They don't care. You are a line item expense and nothing more if you've got a job. So, my recommendation, two things. Stop listening to your brain. Isn't that weird to say? It's like, what the hell are you telling me? Stop listening to your brain. Use your freaking mind. The stuff you've learned since birth is more valuable in most cases, the vast majority of cases, than what you were born with. Use your mind. Take educated risks that have the ability to take you where you want to go. Instead of taking risks that can't even take you where you want to go. It's not going to happen if you don't start taking the right risks. Wow, I didn't realize this conversation was going to be so dark. But it's just irritating me. I teach this in the Saturday class, and it's more fun than what I just did. But it is so important to realize that there are two thought patterns going on, even as you're sitting here right now. As you listen to these speakers, note, there'll be two different things said in your head. This can't be real. It can't be that easy. And then your mind is going to go, hey, there may be an opportunity here. So listen closely to the speakers tonight as they share their ideas, their strategies, and their successes, and let your mind be open to what they're saying so that you can learn from it and then eventually do it yourself. So the first speaker, Frank, are you back there somewhere? Yes. He's going to talk about fourplexes. Now, when I was doing single family, and I brag about owning 100 plus single families, be aware that fourplexes count as single family. Anything fourplexes or below is considered single family. So when I had those 100 plus units, the majority of them were duplexes and fourplexes. So please come on up and go for it. Thank you. Oh.
All right.
There's Bill. Let me find yours. There they are. Let's see. So here are Frank and Carol Parrish.
All right. Well, we'll tell you a little bit about ourselves, and then we'll tell you about the deal. So I'm Frank. This is my beautiful wife, Carol. And we just want to give you a little bit about our background and our journey in hopes that you guys can do it, because if we can do it, you can definitely do it. It's no question. Let's go to the next slide. All right. So a little bit about me and my background, just to tell you a little bit. I grew up with my father every weekend, every summer, working on houses. My dad was doing rental houses when it wasn't cool. You know, he was the guy driving around in a pickup truck with a big steno notebook in the front seat and taking notes and renovating houses, and that's what we did. And so my dad had the philosophy that you need to learn how to do everything on the house. So my summers were electrical, doing plumbing, doing framing, doing roofing, basically doing everything but HVAC. I never did master HVAC. I don't know much about that, but everything else was fair game. And my dad loved to say, oh, go wire that house, and then I'll come back and have the electrician inspect it after you. No pressure. It's like, okay, that's kind of what I grew up doing. So I always had a really deep love of real estate and a big respect for it. And it took me a while to get back to it. I'll tell you a little bit about that as we get into the journey. And so I started out biomedical science major, decided maybe medical school wasn't the right route for me. I went into the Air Force, thought that was a a good way to figure out what I wanted to do. So 6 years, 10 months, 3.5 hours later, I was out of the Air Force. While I was in the Air Force, I picked up an accounting degree, got into accounting. That's a whole other story in itself, so I won't bore you with that. And then I just kind of went through the journey of accounting. Now, I did it on the auditing side. I know you're all excited about, hey, accounting, you can talk about taxes. I don't like taxes. I don't like doing taxes. The only thing I really like is not paying taxes. So that's really the whole goal of all of this, and that's a huge advantage of real estate, is trying to get away from having to pay taxes, or at least minimize them to the degree that we can. So that's my background. I've been doing audits for a little over 20 years, taking companies public. Most of the companies that I deal with now are small startup companies. I kind of like that. I started out with the Big Four doing really big companies, but they're already mature and they weren't as much fun. Now I get to work with little businesses, help them to actually realize their dreams, raise capital, and ultimately be listed on NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange. And so that's what I've been doing. But looking back, it was never my passion. Real estate has always really been my passion. And so now I find myself wanting to just do real estate full time. It's what I love. I'd rather be working with a tenant, unclogging a toilet, doing whatever it takes, than dealing with accounting. So that's kind of my background and where I'm from. Next slide. And then Carol, she doesn't really want to, she's a little shy. Although you would never know that, because when I married her, I thought...
I'm not shy.
Not shy
I just
anymore. There
hate
she is.
talking
Okay.
in public.
Okay.
You'll see that I'm not shy.
Okay. So I'll introduce her, but her background was basically global mobility. She worked for a big oilfield services company. And just like you know, and here in Houston, there's a lot of volatility in the oil, up and down, and her whole division was about to get laid off. And so we were dating at the time, and I said, you know what? Don't worry about it. Let's get into real estate. I know how real estate should work because I watched my dad do it. Now's the time. Now's the time to be that prodigal son and return back to what you know and really jump into real estate. So I told her not to worry about it. We started diving into these types of meetings head first. How many people this is their first spotlight night? You're in the right place. Thanks for sharing that. That's exactly where we were a few years ago. Actually been quite a few years now. We've been doing this for a while. And we just wanted to start educating ourselves. So we spent about a year educating ourselves. Long story short, we were able to replace our income in a pretty quick period of time just by doing what we're all talking about now, buying rental houses and renovating them. So before that, she was a global mobility manager, so she's really good with people. She's good with logistics. She's doing all these things, and when I met her, I thought she's this sweet little innocent creature, right? Little did I know that when I put her in front of a tenant or a contractor, wow, that she has a lot of power. So she was able to jump in and manage the contractors, read them the riot act when they weren't getting things done timely, and make sure they don't cut corners, and then I'm able to go out and actually help her do that. So this is us doing what we love. In the process of all of that, we both got a real estate license. She's also a residential appraiser now. So we've really taken real estate pretty seriously and got into this completely. Next slide. So kind of how we started was we first bought a property that we think, looking back, was a beautiful house, but we made a mistake. We bought expensive house, cheap land. We bought out in the suburbs. And we realized that if you buy closer to the city later and you buy maybe more expensive land, cheaper house, you get a better return. Because what happens is rent doesn't go up proportionate with the mortgage payment, right? So the mortgage payment could be really high and your rent's not as high. You can rent a 2-bedroom apartment in the hood and you're going to get about $1,000 a month. You can rent a 2-bedroom apartment somewhere else and it's not going to be so much more than $1,000, right? So what we figured, that's at least with houses. Now apartments, completely different game, but with houses, the more that you can minimize your PITI, your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, you get more cash flow, so that's what it was all about. So we quickly figured out we wanted to be more in gentrifying areas, so we started buying houses all around just north of Oak Forest, Independence Heights, around 5th Ward. And the subject property we're going to talk about tonight was right outside of Oak Forest and Independence Heights. So that turned out to be a fantastic deal. And what we figured out through this whole process is just keep following the process. So that BRRRR method, the BRRRR method is you buy it, you renovate it, you refinance it, you rent it, and then you repeat it. You just keep doing that process. And the other part of that is what I call the KISS principle, and it's not the keep it simple, stupid one that we've all heard, but this one is keep some, sell some, and scale. Because we figured out pretty quick we ran out of money, right? So what do? We keep flipping houses, sell some of the ones that were rented that weren't performing as well, take that money, use it as seed money, and buy some more. We just keep repeating that process. Well, at some point we figured out we can't really scale this because you can only manage and buy so many single-family houses. So we started looking around, and I talked to a lot of other people in town, and they said, go talk to Steve. So here we are, Total Wealth Academy, and now we're on to the next step with looking at commercial property. Next slide. So this is really what we figured out, is that if we can find the right market, find a gentrifying area, something that's up and coming, that it's going to keep appreciating in value pretty quickly, and we'll be able to increase the rents pretty quickly over time. So we looked at a few different things. We looked at a few target markets in town. We focused on those markets, and we kept buying more houses in those areas. And one of the reasons was because of economy of scale. If you're managing one property in that area and another property across town, you got logistical problems. But if you buy them all together in near, pretty close proximity, a lot easier to manage. So that was kind of our concept, at least what we followed. And we also always might, as an accountant, I have to make sure the numbers work. So we kind of followed this rule: if the numbers don't work, we don't buy it. But as long as we could cash flow and meet our own parameters, we just kept following that formula. Next slide. So we also figured out that a lot of issues happen. And you can see this was one of the houses we bought in Fifth Ward, the before and after pictures. Looks a little different after we got through with it. And things happen as you get through this. The foundation maybe is not as good as you thought. Maybe there's some problems. So what we figured out is always have a contingency plan. Make sure that you always have enough cash reserve set aside that if something should come up, you're able to handle the problem. And just keep pushing through the problem. There's always a solution. You just have to figure out what it is. So we just kept pressing forward. That's kind of been our mantra. Yep. So one of the biggest things that we learned, probably at going to a lot of networking events just like this, is best product, best price, right? So we would take a house no matter where it was, even if it really looked rough when we first got it, like you can see the before and after of this house that we did. This is a house over in 77016. And the before and after, but what we decided is best product, best price is fix it up to where we would want to live in it. Even if it looked rough in the beginning, we put in everything that we could think of that was still affordable and the right for that demographic. We don't want to over-improve it, but at the same time, make it livable, make it safe, make it clean, make it a good place to live, and you take care of your tenants. Usually they take care of your house, not always. We can tell you some stories about that too. But normally they take care of your house. The house then will continue to give you great returns. Next. So the subject property that we're talking about, this is a great story. So I saw this one out on a wholesale blast. It's one of those wholesale blasts that went out over and over. I kept seeing the email. It kept nagging me. I kept liking the property when I saw it, but it wasn't priced right. So finally there was an opportunity to go see it. So Carol and I went and saw it on one rainy afternoon. We go to the front door with a wholesaler, and we're kind of walking a tour of the property. And what you can see here is it's basically a duplex in the front, and then there are 2 more units in the back. And the mix was a 4-bedroom, 1-bath, 3-bedroom, 1-bath, and so on. So when we go to the right-hand side, we open the door, and you can't see. There's a cloud of blue smoke. Somebody's smoking something in there. Almost knocked me out as I opened the door. A couple of pit bulls and cages in there, fleas everywhere. So we were completely covered in fleas. In fact, she's laughing because it goes so bad, the contractor said, we can't even work there. Once we finally got those tenants out of there after we closed on the property, we still had to put flea bombs in there and get rid of all the fleas before we could even start renovations. Even the contractors couldn't stand to be in that house. It was pretty bad. But this was a wholesale deal. We actually went down the street to a Starbucks, signed a 1-sheet transfer of contract or assignment of contract with a wholesaler, and crossed my fingers. We wrote a check, took it to the title company, and locked it up. But for us at the time, this was very scary. It was something that was kind of new and different. And this area was a little bit rough at that time. It's just north of Oak Forest in Independence Heights. But that area actually turned out to be really good. We had done the numbers, we had done the homework, so we just had to follow the process and trust our instincts, and it turned out really well. So the rehab, we bought it in March of 2017. We rehabbed all the units. It lasted about 5 months. Through that period of time, we had a hurricane hit us and almost flooded, not quite. We put in some sandbags just to be safe. Turned out everything was okay, but we did lose a contractor out of that deal because all the contractors at that time when the hurricane hit, they got shiny object syndrome. Some of you might have gone through that, where they got a lot more money tearing sheetrock out of flooded houses than they did working on our house. So then we were left high and dry with no contractors. And that was a learning experience, right? So we scrambled and found some more contractors and kept it going. And fortunately, we had learned not to spend too much up front or not to give the contractors too much up front, right? You have to basically manage those, manage your funds, and keep it going. But we got it all stabilized. We got the rehab done pretty quickly. We turned over the tenant base completely. So that all worked out really well. Next slide. And you can see from the numbers, pretty good deal. So we got a purchase price of $215. We used a hard money loan. With a hard money loan, you're allowed to roll in up to 75% LTV, or you could at that time, of your loan price plus your overall rehab costs. And so when we went and got an appraisal, as we were closing on it, at that time, let's see, do we have it up there? The appraisal at that time, let's see. Yeah, I don't know if I have it up there. So the appraisal basically allowed us to get a loan of $229,000. And so that was at that time 75% of the after repair value. So that's basically the way the lender would loan on it. So we were able to then actually go to the closing table with a wholesale deal, no money out of pocket, sign it title, take the actual property, the title of the property, as well as $15,000 check to start our whole process with zero money out of pocket. This is why I love real estate, right? We literally got a fourplex for zero. So that was fantastic. Now, we did actually put some money into it because we had to do some renovations. The renovations exceeded the $15,000. But all in, our repairs were right around $35,000. You can see that we had repairs funded from the loan of $15,000, so actual cash out of pocket, about 20 grand all in when all was said and done. Now, the repairs that we did on this, we put in, actually was in pretty good shape. It had hardy plank siding already, had a relatively new roof. All we really did was put in some new flooring, new paint, fix some sheetrock, put in the flea bombs that we talked about because of all the fleas, fix those problems. And we put in some HVAC units. I think we put in 2 brand new HVAC units and 1 reconditioned condenser coil on one of the units, so they all had AC. And other than that, you know, for 20 grand, we just basically turned over the whole tenant base, raised the rents. Next slide. And when we're able to raise the rents, we rent from $32.50 total when we first acquired it. As we renovated the units and turned the tenants over within about a year, we increased the rents to $4,500. So then after our total principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, our cash flow was actually pretty good, $2,600 a month. So overall cash on cash return, 156%. So based on a $20,000 out of pocket, you can see that pretty amazing return. So I love this deal. And we did many deals like this, but this was my favorite because partly it was the scariest one. It was the first one we did like this. At the time, it seemed like a lot, but you know, then it just got easier and easier. That's why I say if we can do this, anybody can do this. So next slide. Oh, sorry, go back one slide. Yep. So on this last slide, what I do want to show on this one, you can see the aerial view. So it was a duplex in the front, and then it was actually another little unit on the left-hand side in the back, which was a 2-bedroom, 1 bath, and then the far right-hand corner in the back, kind of under the trees, was a little 1-bedroom, 1 bath. So we had issues with parking. We had issues with tenants. It's kind of close proximity. But overall, it turned out to be pretty good. Next slide. So this is an interior of one of the units. You actually see where we just went in. We put in, the cabinets were already there. We repainted it, put in new flooring, mostly all cosmetic. So we tried to take that 20 grand out of pocket and stretch it, plus the other 15 out of the loan, stretch it as far as we could. And some new appliances, yeah, we had to put in a couple of stoves. And we had talked the seller into giving us the stainless steel refrigerator that was already in there, so we didn't have to worry about that. Gained a couple of stoves in that, so overall pretty good. Now on this one, you can see that we actually ultimately only held it for 2 years. So it took us about 5 months to renovate it. We turned all the tenant base over, increased the rents. After 2 years, we actually were able to then sell it because this was just north of Oak Forest, right there in Independence Heights, which is, if you know where Shepherd is, just north of the Heights, right above Cross Timbers, it was right there. There's a lot of new development in that area, so that's what we always look for, is a lot of new development in an area that's being revitalized. So in that area, it appreciated so quickly that when I got the next tax bill, I said, okay, it's time to sell. We don't want to keep paying the taxes. So we went then and we sold it literally at $475 after only paying, remember we only paid $215 for it with 20 grand out of pocket. So on this one, our equity multiple was a 10x. So I think this was totally a home run. So that's one of the reasons we're so excited about this deal. Next slide. So what are we doing next? So the biggest thing that we're doing now is trying to figure out what we were going to do after going through this series of process. We wanted to go faster. We wanted to be able to scale. And the biggest way that we could do that is we knew we wanted to get into multifamily and we couldn't do it by ourselves. It's totally a team effort and a team sport. So we were able to find Total Wealth Academy and find Steve, and now we're working on moving into multifamily. Now this is another picture of another renovation that we did, kind of in that same area a little bit. This is just east of 59. You can see another before and after. This is another example of something we did over on Weaver Road with zero out of pocket. This was another amazing story where if the numbers work, they work. So as long as the numbers work, zero out of pocket, you do your renovations and rent it out. Next slide. So like I said, the biggest goal of all of this is for us to syndicate and begin doing bigger deals. But I'll tell you a little bit about the background of what my big motivation is. So my big motivation is what you don't know is you do know that we replaced Carol's income pretty quickly. That's why I'm such a big believer in real estate. And I also told you that I grew up with my father renovating houses and going through and watching him do that at a young age. My dad got killed in a tragic boating accident when I was only 22 years old. And that was one of the reasons I think I shied away from real estate for a while, is because for me it was a little painful to go back to real estate because that's what I grew up doing. It reminded me of my father. But what I saw is the portfolio of houses. It's a modest portfolio of houses that he had. It was enough to take care of my stepmother for the rest of her life, even to this day. She still lives off those houses. She still lives off that income. Everything that my dad built from those houses through that modest portfolio, it continues to sustain her. And that's why what Steve was talking about earlier, it really hits home to me. If you have a job, you got one paycheck. If you've got rental houses, they're never all going to be vacant at once. They're never all going to burn down at once. You have multiple streams of income. So this is why I'm so passionate about real estate, because I know it took care of my father's bride. It took care now of Carol. It'll take care of you. It's just, you got to just understand and trust the process and follow the process. So next slide. So Q&A, anybody have any questions? Yes? Great question. So some of it we would literally drive for dollars. We would drive around neighborhoods, and we did a lot of wholesaling in the beginning, marketing. We did postcards. That's one of the things Steve talks about in his Saturday class, is how to do wholesaling, marketing, different ways you can do it. Most of these deals we found from wholesalers. We met them at events like this. We talked to other investors. Some of them we found on MLS. Literally, we just went out on MLS, looked at what was listed, and we look at the numbers. We make some low offers, and if we occasionally got a low offer accepted, we would be able to get houses right off the MLS using a real estate agent. And we're also both licensed realtors now, which we got our license through this process, and then we would just start submitting offers. But you don't have to have your license, right? You can use an agent. There are agents here at Total Wealth Academy, and just start submitting offers. Because if you submit enough offers, you'll get one of them for sure. Yeah, great question. Yeah.
Did you forecast that additional $20,000 in rehab costs, or was that a complete surprise?
Oh, it wasn't an additional $20,000. It was just, that's what I had to bring out of pocket. So yeah, to answer your question, his question was, did I forecast the additional $20,000? Well, actually, it was always planned to do the renovation. We walked it. The great thing, the $20,000 was just what I had to pay out of pocket, because the other $15,000 of that renovation, I rolled it into the loan. Because remember, in a loan, in most cases, you can roll up to 75% of the loan to value into your refinance. So we followed that BRRRR strategy, right, which is you buy it, and then you renovate it, and then you refinance it. So when you go from hard money to refi, you can literally roll 75% of those costs right into the conventional loan. Yeah, great question. Yes, sir.
What is your total current portfolio?
Total current portfolio is, we've been going through that keep some, sell some scale. So now we're down to 22 units over 11 properties. And based on those, it more than replaced her income. It's a pretty good passive income, but now we're looking to really scale. Because what we figured out, it's a lot easier to scale when you have a lot of properties either close together or even better, apartments, right? So that's really the next step for us. Yeah. Any other?
What was the interest rate that you got on that floor price? Because now the interest rate's kind of high. Was it high because it was a hard money loan, or?
Yeah, great question. So her question was, what was the interest rate? When we got it hard money, it was right around 11% at that time, with 2 points to close. When we refinanced it, I think that particular one, we got about 3.5 back at that time, which was a great interest rate. But even now, interest rates are starting to come back down. Now you can get them in the high to mid sixes. So they're starting to come back down, and hopefully as we get closer to the election, the Fed's already said they're going to come down at least 3 to 4 more times this year. So I think we're in the right place at the right time. Yeah, any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So you said you're going into multifamily? Are you just doing it with you and your wife, or are you gonna do it with investors?
With investors, we're going to be doing some syndications, absolutely. So if we hit the bar, I'm happy to talk to all of you about that. Yep, great question. Yes, sir. Right, so what I was talking about is if you use a hard money loan to acquire a distressed property, then you can actually pour all of your costs up to 75% of the after repair value. So an appraisal company will come out and they'll do a quick appraisal. They'll figure out what the after repair value will be based on your repairs. And you only want to repair it to the actual extent of that area. So if everybody else has, marble countertops or granite, nice cabinets, you want to repair to that level. And they'll appraise it saying that these are the repairs, what they're going to be when you're done. That's what they're going to give you the new appraisal value at. That's what you can actually refi it to.
Some of the lenders that we attempted to use, we had come up with the other 25%.
Well, if you do 100% of the ARV, right? So what we're trying to do is buy a house below the appraised value. So if the appraised value was $100,000, for instance, we only want to put up to $75,000 into it. It's still worth $100,000, but we only have $75,000 into it between the loan, the debt, and our equity, right, which is our cash out of pocket. So as long as you're less than that 75% threshold, then you're really zero out of pocket. Any incremental dollars you go above that, yeah, you would absolutely be out of pocket.
You're able
Yes, sir.
to determine that after repair value before you acquire the property, before you write a contract?
Yes and no. That's a great question. So his question was, can you determine the value of the property before you acquire it? Yes, you can. Now, you don't always know exactly what the appraiser is going to come up with, but you can do a comparative market analysis. So just like here at Total Wealth, we got the real estate team here. They can run comps for you and tell you what is the market value in that area. So you'll know going into it before you sign the contract what the value should be, but you can't always guarantee that what the appraiser sees is going to pick the exact same comps you did. But usually you're pretty close. Usually, and she's great at this. She's also an appraiser. She can usually come in within $5,000. So she hits it, right on the money every time. But usually you can. Great question. Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah, that's always an issue. So his question was, did you have trouble getting the tenants out of the house when you bought it? So this fourplex in this case, we had a couple of tenants that didn't want to leave, so we just threatened them with eviction. And also what works sometimes is cash for keys, right? You get more bees with honey than with vinegar. So sometimes instead of trying to threaten them with eviction, you just say, hey, I'll just give you $200 if you leave today, or $300, whatever it is. It's cheaper for me than trying to go through eviction court and wasting another month. And that usually works most of the time, especially in that situation. Yeah, great question.
I have evicted a lot of people though, so.
Yeah, she's evicted a lot of people, yeah. It happens. But we're pretty good at screening tenants now, so that's pretty rare these days. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
All right,
Frank.
thanks.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Carol.
You want to hear?
Yeah, here's fine. I want to address something because a lot of people do have the fear of hurricanes, fires, and things like that. We got insurance for that, especially the fire. No one, please, when I say this, I'm kidding. You want your units to burn down. Just burn them down. I had a little 23 unit, right, over off West Belfort, rough area. I carried a gun to collect my rent, which is not the right decision, by the way. Those of you that are buying property, if you have to carry a gun to pick up your rent, you picked the wrong property, okay? So I had to evict this prostitute. She was overcharging me. And she decides to set a grease fire. I love Craig. I love Craig. Oh my God, Craig. So I evict her for, having too many people visiting. And she decides to set a grease fire. She just puts a pan of grease, turns the thing on, and leaves. Boom! Burns down 3 units. They wrote me a check. I rehabbed 6 units with that check. During Hurricane Ike, an apartment complex on Galveston Island, they had paid $21 million for it or thereabout. Hurricane Ike hits, destroys the entire thing. They wrote them a check for $28 million. They didn't even rebuild it. They just took the $7 million profit and left. You can see it, it's on the seawall. It's just a bunch of slabs now because the buildings are all gone. You want your units to burn down. But you don't. I never said that. Next speaker just completed an 80-unit purchase as a syndicator. So please welcome Daniel Markland to talk about, now, is this a multi-unit?
Yes.
Daniel? Okay, about multi-units.
That's good. Thanks, Steve. All right. Let's see if we got this here. All right, great. All right, evening, everyone. Happy New Year. Glad to see everyone here. Honestly, I thought there'd be a smaller turnout, so I'm glad to see so many folks. So my name's Dan Markland. I'm the owner of Archline Capital. So I'm a real estate investor here in Houston. I've been doing it now for 2.5 years. So I own a few small multifamilies, as well as Steve mentioned now, pivoting to being a syndicator buying large multifamily properties. So we have an 80-unit in Texas City that we are about to close on, not yet, but we should be done anytime soon. But so what I want to talk on today is I'm going to do a case study on a 6-unit property I have here in Houston that I bought 2 years ago. And I wanted to, a lot of times we see in real estate, always see is the success stories and everything is just peaches and roses, everything's great, right? So I want to show this property and take you through some of the issues we had. But I still want to show you this for 2 reasons. That one, so you can see all the troubles and hardships and potentially how you can avoid them or handle them. But 2, how you can go through it and realize that even though so many things can go wrong, real estate still works. I almost thought of saying everything can go wrong, but I tried to tone it back a bit, not be as dark. So hang with me. We're going to go through this. I'll show you this property, this deal, what happened, what's the results, and then hopefully we can talk about it and I can answer any questions. So this deal, where is it? It's on the east side of Houston. If you guys see the map over there, if folks of you around here know, it's right by Gus Wortham Golf Course, near the Ship Channel, near Hobby Airport, Med Center downtown. It's in a really hot area right now being developed in Houston. It's on Pasadena Street, Forest Hills neighborhood. You can see in the picture that magenta little box, that's the property. So it's right by the bayou. It's in this little neighborhood that's being redeveloped, kind of the path of progress of east end of Houston. That's where it's located. And so the details on it. So it's a 6-unit property, but there's 2 different structures. So in the front, there's a duplex, and that was built in 1934. When I bought it, it was completely to the studs. The sellers had bought it and were trying to renovate it. So there's a duplex completely to the studs. And then in the back, there's a 4-plex. And that one was built in 1960. They had done some interior renovations, but a lot of the exterior wasn't done. So you had 2 bedrooms and then little small efficiencies on the bottom. So I purchased it February 10th, 2022. The list price was $400,000. Now, that sat for probably 3 months or so. It kept coming down, and then we finally got it for $320,000. So we got it for a pretty big discount. And with the closing costs and the rehab, we expect to put over $200,000 into it, but be all in about $540,000. So kind of a fairly big lift, big value add property. And so I thought I'd put in $140,000 into the property when I bought it. Now the sellers I mentioned, they were mid-rehab. The sellers actually had to bring $3,000 to closing because they were underwater on the property. They bought it, they thought they could get it done, real estate's easy, cut corners, and they got caught. And so bad for them, good for me. So I took over from there, tried to finish it out. So the plan was, so we got 2 years, from February 2022 till now. The plan was, okay, about 8 months of rehab. So again, the 4-unit, fully occupied, but exterior needed a lot of work. Duplex in the front, down to the studs, needed everything. Everything. Plumbing, HVAC, electrical, interiors, everything. So 8 months, finish it all, lease it out, stabilize it, get it cash flowing, and then operate it and make some money, right? And so unfortunately, I think I already told you in the title, but things did not go to plan. So I got 10 different issues we dealt with that I'm going to go through with you guys, and hopefully you can get a kick out of these. Learn some things, laugh a bit, but hopefully don't get discouraged. Hang with me. There's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So the first one, what happened? Even before we closed, contractor troubles. We were closing on Thursday afternoon, Thursday. Monday morning of that week of closing, my contractor calls me and says, hey, I'm not going to do this project anymore. And this contractor was on the loan documents, was vetted by the lender, and was required to be with me for closing so they would lend on the property. He said he's an old school guy, his LLC's not current, they're looking into his financials, this and that. It's too much of a hassle. He backed out. So 3 days before closing, my main linchpin to this project was gone. So what did I do? Well, got creative. So I said, okay, that's great. You're still signing on the closing documents, and then after we close, I'm going to fire you, and then I'll hire someone else. So that's what we did. So we got it done. The lender didn't really like it, but hey, sometimes you got to ask for forgiveness rather than permission. But the only problem was the next lowest bidder was $30,000 higher than he was. So what's the lesson? We all know this. Cheapest is not best, right? And also trust your gut. So I knew there would be a lot more hand-holding with this guy, but I said, hey, I'll take a shot with him. It's okay. It's probably going to be worth it. But reliability is more important over anything else. All right, so next thing that happened. So then we closed on it, and now foundation. Now this one and the next two we actually knew going beforehand, but I highlight these because these are 3 things people are always afraid about, this one and the next 2. So in the back, the foundation was sagging a little bit, so we actually had a structural engineer. We had to put in 18 piers to reinforce the foundation, jack it up, and support it. And so normally when people hear foundation, they run the other way, right? But for me, when actually I got the quote for this, I was actually pretty encouraged. It was only $4,000, and it actually turned out seamlessly. It was okay. It's a lot of work. I always love this picture because on the side, you can barely see the hat of the guy on the side. He was about 5'8". So they had to dig down crazy deep and put these piers in, but yet for $4,000, now I got a foundation that is secured, stamped, engineered, etc. So it was good to go. So my lesson, a lot of times, not always as bad as you think, but also if you do foundations, budget for interior repairs afterwards. Don't overlook that. You raise it up, doors are going to move, seams are going to crack, etc. But put it in your budget and take it on, right? All right, then we had roof repairs. So we had to do a new roof, and 5 minutes into starting the roof project, I got a call from the contractor that said, hey, we got a problem. He said, we took off the roof, this one section, we found there are 7 layers of old roofing underneath what you currently have. He said, I don't even know how this roof is still standing. I don't even know how it's still supported right now. So we had to get rid of all these layers. There's a lot more extra haul away, man hours. More of the decking was bad. Some of the rafters needed to be replaced. So it ended up being an extra $7,000 from what we expected from the quote. But luckily, I budgeted for that in our contingency. So I put in $10,000. I said we can go up to 30 grand. So even though it cost us $7,000 more, we actually ended up okay. So what's the lesson? I got 2 lessons. Flat roofs are specialties. And you can find that on a lot of multifamily, small multifamily. Make sure you get the right vendor. This guy saved me. He did it right. But also, if you have big ticket items like this, go ahead and budget contingency for them specifically. Don't just do it on your whole project. If you got something like this, build a buffer in, right? So there's a new roof, right? Looks great. Oh, yeah. Now the other one, what else scares people away? Termites. Again, we knew this beforehand, but so we had termites. We had to have my guy Jermaine right over there. Jermaine had to come in. He had to drill 48 holes in the concrete, which he ended up breaking 8 drill bits because it was so thick. But he drilled holes through the concrete, sprayed in the ground. He also sprayed in the walls in the attic. And the biggest thing, there was an HVAC leak, window unit leaking down the side of the property, which was bringing termites up through the wall there. So we shored that up. So it actually, it could have cost $3 grand, but my guy Jermaine, he got it done for $1,500. So the lesson here, there's 3 types of termites. Unfortunately, Houston has all 3 of them. But so one's dry wood. Those live in your walls, and you might need to tent if you have those. The other 2 are subterranean Formosan, which live in the ground. And so you can usually drill in the ground and treat and kill those without a lot of issue. So if you see it, don't necessarily freak out. Get an inspector, determine what you have, stop any source of leaks of water or whatever, bringing the termites in, and then get multiple options on the treatment. So termites, I think people freak out, but for less than $3 grand, we were able to figure it out. Now this one, and you notice these first 5 are all within the first 2 months. This one, tenant troubles. So it was Sunday morning. We had just got done with church, and I got a phone call from one of my tenants that said, "Hey, by the way, we're leaving. We're moving out this week." I said, "What happened?" They said, "The neighbor. We don't really like the neighbor. The other tenant. We're just leaving." Well, so I went to the property, and one of the good tenants told me, "Yeah, I guess the police got called, and apparently 2 tenants at the bottom share a wall. One of them has a dog, and her dog, I guess, was barking at night. So one of them told them, 'Hey, please quiet your dog,' although I don't think they said please, and I don't think they said quiet your dog. And she said, 'Hey, mind your own business,' although she probably said something worse than that. And so eventually they started arguing, and the police got called. Luckily, there was no physical altercation, so there was no legal issues with my part. But both of those tenants, they split. So that was $1,400 a month of rent that I wasn't expecting of losing. But the lesson I learned here was let bad tenants go, especially inherited tenants. If you're buying a place, it's not worth it. It's not worth hanging on to the rent. Let them go. Turn over the unit, move on, get it re-rented, right? Take your lickings and move on. All right, so this is 6 of 10. So this is where the big issues started happening. So permits, another one of the buzzwords, right? Foundation, roof, termite permits. So I mentioned we bought the duplex to the studs. The sellers, they had tried to redo it without a permit, got caught. They tried to get a repair permit, got caught. They got a remodel permit, they got stopped because they were doing the work incorrectly and they weren't doing it to code or with inspections, so they were stuck, right? So when we bought it, we hired our permit handler and we said, "Hey," my general contractor did, and said, "Work with the city, figure it out, do whatever we need to do." So the handler said, "Great, I got it." They say we can move forward, we'll finish construction, we'll get inspections at the end, they'll sign off, good to go. Well, 8 red tags and 2 citations later, he didn't figure it out. He had no idea what he was doing with the city. The city came, we had actually done 6 months of construction and done the majority of the work on the duplex, and they put up those red tags and said, "No, you have to stop work. You have to get a new permit. You can't use these current ones. You have to start all over, essentially." And that citation is to me. Even though I'm not the contractor or the permit applicant, as the owner, I'm liable. They cited me for failing to obtain a permit and for failing to obey an order from the building official. So they cited me for $2,000 of charges personally that I had to go to court for, and then eventually got cleared. but that's what they did to stop the work to make sure we figured things out. So, what's the lesson? If you have existing permits, figure out where they are and what state the inspections are in. If you need to get permits, there are building permits in Houston, right? And you can either get a repair, a remodel, or new construction. Be very clear which one you need. If your rehab is going to be more than 50% of the value of the property, so if you are buying a $320,000 property and we were doing $200,000 of rehab, technically, we probably needed a new construction permit. The problem is if you do that, you got to do everything to the new codes, and that's a lot more money, right? So we had to now figure out, okay, how do we get around this without having to redo everything and get stuck? And right about that time, my contractor, after that was going on, we're going to figure permits out, he said, hey, you want to come talk? Come at lunchtime on Friday? I think I have a business opportunity for you. I said, yeah, actually, that sounds cool. Sure, let's see what's up. So the business opportunity was to help save his failing contractor business, which was working on my property. And I still respect the guy, and I don't think he did. He was not nefarious at all, but it's a bad management. Some of his people mismanaged a lot of funds, and it looks like they were going under. And so I didn't know. I thought they could right the ship, maybe not, but in December, I get the first notice from the appliance company that says, hey, we've never gotten paid for this. We're going to file a lien if you don't pay us directly. And for those of you who don't know, they don't go to the contractors. They go to you as the owner because they know you will pay up because you can't have a lien on your property. So I figured it out with them, and they weren't unreasonable. They know they cut me a deal. They said we just need to get paid. But then in February, the inevitable happened, and they filed for bankruptcy. So my general contractor, the linchpin, figuring everything out, is out of business, right in the middle, figuring out permits, halfway through the renovation, done a lot of the work, and he's got nothing for you. And that actually ended up costing me an extra about 15 grand because that was either work that I had paid them for and they had done, but they hadn't paid their subcontractors, so I had to make them whole, or it was work that they did and they needed to finish or they needed to come back and kind of redo some things, but they never did it because they were out of business, so I had to pick up where they left off and take over from there. So that was a good about 15 grand. I know that number exactly because that's the number I filed in the bankruptcy hearings for the court. So here, one lesson, I put this here, we always say use reputable contractors, pay in installments, do not pay too much up front. You can give them a little to get started, make sure you're checking on work complete. But I honestly, this was a very reputable contractor. Some of you actually have probably used them and knew who I'm talking about. And so I put in here, this is kind of the motif, number 3 of all of these, is just sometimes in real estate, stuff happens, man. You just got to roll with it, figure out. You can't cry over spilt milk, figure out, move on, right? All right, tenant damages. Frank, they talked about, a lot of good tenant experiences. So then, my last bad inherited tenant, they decided to move out. And unfortunately, they moved out and they had some dogs and pets. And so if you guys are looking at what pets can do, in the carpeted areas of the bedrooms, they pretty much peed all over it and stained everything. Carpets, subfloor, etc. So I took the opportunity, rehabbed it, got it up and running, but it was about $3,200, not just of damages, but of unpaid utilities, termination fees, rent, etc., that is still outstanding. And I filed collections on them, but you're never going to see a dime of that. No way. So get them out. If you take inherited tenants, luckily, their lease was month to month. I put them on a year-long lease and made them put down a pet deposit. So it still wasn't enough, but at least I had $300 more than I would have, right? This is what it looks like. This is what it looks like now, though, right? Yeah, so here's a tip. Here's a big tip. If you rehab a unit, take pictures before you get it occupied and get somebody to do virtual staging on every unit. each picture was $25, even less than that. And now I have that for the whole life of the property, right? So get virtual staging, make it look nice. All right, we got 2 more. All right, I mentioned permit, part 1. Now it's coming back to bite us, right? This one slide, I honest to God could probably spend 4 hours on. And my wife has heard so many phone calls about this, and there's been so much consternation about this one slide. But anyway, I won't get too heated. So I mentioned contractors out the door. Permits, we're stopped. We got to get a new permit, right? Duplex is sitting there unrented. We are now 4 months behind schedule. And it comes to find out the permit handler, who I mentioned already, had his buddies, was going to figure it out. It becomes very evident he doesn't know what he's doing. And so I said, all right, I stepped in and said, we got to figure out what we're going to do to get the permits done and get this property finished. So we stepped in, took over in February. He was still involved because it was under his name. But got the architect, got the city, got the plans approved, got the subcontractors, the electrical, got the electricity hooked up, the TCI inspection, the plumbing, the mechanical, the blower door inspections, everything you needed, got it approved, and then finally structural final floodplain sign off. But that took about 6 months there, right? And so I'll put another part where what I mentioned on the last slide, right, about sometimes you just got to pony up and roll on. This was the structural final. You know, after we had done all of that was a very delicate process, because if you go through permits, you have to get inspections before you start, before you cover things up, as you go, right? We hadn't done any of that. All the work was already done because we thought, nah, we're good, don't worry about it, right? Well, the problem is, now that we're coming to the inspectors and we say, hey, we need a final inspection, they're going, well, what about the prior inspections? And so we had to, this whole process, play dumb, beg, borrow. There was one time I was at the city office, I was ready to cry. Like, I was getting it ready if I needed to, just to get them to be like, you're good to go. We just had to do, this was a part of, you got to do whatever you got to do. Because if they go, no, you got to open that wall, you got to redo this not the code anymore, it could have been a nightmare. This was here on the structural final. They came through, and this was the biggest unnerving part, because we had done a lot of structural, and they had been there. And all he said was, hey, everything looks good, but your firewall in the middle, it's a duplex. In your attic, every seam has to be fire caulked. It's got to be fire rated, right? So you can't have any seams, no air gaps. And you have a raised foundation. You need to have a firewall underneath your property. You have to have drywall underneath in the crawl space, underneath your property, to qualify as a firewall. So instead of just getting contractors out there to do it, I just said, screw it, man. I could see the finish line. We're just going to do this. So I took 4 days, went in the attic. When it was August in Houston, it was 104 degrees. And I fire caulked every frickin' seam in that attic. And then I went underneath the house, and I army crawled with a rake, pushing snakes and grass, or putting all kinds of stuff out of the way, just to push up some drywall and screw it in, just so that on Monday, that inspector came back and he could give us the blessing and move forward. So that's sometimes, you just got to do what you got to do, right? Yeah, right? That was the hardest 2 days of my life, is crawling under that house, 16-inch crawl space. But anyway, I put up there, I calculated we lost 200 days from permit incompetence. I say incompetence is at best. Willful negligence, pathological liar, et cetera, whatever, is at worst. So again, know your permits before you go in, get it straight immediately. And then the last one, habitability, is if you don't know, if you have a building that has 3 units or more in Houston, it has to be registered with the habitability department, and you have to get an habitability inspection every 4 years, as well as having a certificate of occupancy. Well, lucky for us, we have a 4-unit. It's never been registered. It's never had an inspection. And guess when they decided to do an inspection? Right after we bought the property. So they came, they inspected it, and I honestly, there's a big gap there, because I thought they inspected the wrong building. I was like, guys, no, the permits are the duplex in the front. Like, you are the wrong building here. And they told us, no, actually, that's the right building. You got to fix all these things. So this was another very tenuous process, but luckily we got it done. And habitability is things like Make sure you got covers on your outlets. If you have AC units that got proper drains. Your electrical panels, we had to get custom fit sheets, dead fronts for the panels. This is all kinds of things, and it doesn't matter if they wrote it on the report, you got to get it done. So habitability, before you go in, make sure it's registered. Know when you have your last inspection in your property. So here's the final status. That's the fourplex in the back. That's the duplex. That's the interior of the duplex. I already showed you the interior of the fourplex. So it looks pretty nice. It's fully rented now. And this is the last slide. So the question is, right, was it all worth it? So at the beginning, I put there how almost everything can go wrong. Or no, so many things can go wrong, and yet it still works. So this is what the end result was. So I mentioned I was planning to put about $140,000 in. It ended up being about $166,000 in because of the extra rehab permits, habitability, holding costs, etc. But if you look at our performance, so the last 4 months, when we were fully occupied and stabilized, you can see our operating income for those of you that know NOI. If you take away our loan, we're making just about $2,000 a month. And now that's actually a lot lower because we have a 20-year amortization loan on it. So this loan's got a lot more principal pay down and equity than straight up cash flow. But if you still look at this, it's got a very low expense ratio. We have a very high debt coverage. And we increased our income 120% from what they had at purchase, which is, I think, pretty good. And so if you put that into returns, so if we sold it today, we probably have made about $100,000 of equity in the property. And I think that's probably, hopefully, pretty conservative. So if you look right now, your annual cash flow, cash on cash return, 13%, which is not near 158%, but it's still, I think, pretty good for a multifamily property. But if you talk about what's your annual return, your IRR, if we sold today, it's probably about 20% for the past 2 years. But I think the big play is to say if you hold in this area that is appreciating like crazy, I think conservatively it's easily above 25 to 30% just with simple numbers. So the big question, was it worth it? Well, I look and say, what else would we do? If we put our money in the S&P 500, so for the last 2 years on this property, if we made about 20% a year, how much do you guys think we would have made if we put in the S&P 500? Luckily for us, that was the height of the S&P. It dipped, it came back up, but if you put in S&P 500, you would have made 3.2% per year for the last 2 years. So real estate quintupled plus what you do in the stock market. So this is the last bit. Even with all the hassle, during a tough real estate environment, to me it still works. Don't expect to only hit home runs. Don't expect to get rich quick. And as they say, remember, time in the market is more important than timing the market, right? There's never a perfect time. Now is always the best time to buy, smartly. All right, so that's it. I think we have a few minutes for questions. So who's got the first question? Yes? Yeah, it's a really good question. He said, talking about general contractors paying subcontractors. So I think there's two parts. When they are coming to me and saying, hey, I never got paid, it was very simple that I asked my GC, and he said, yeah, they haven't gotten paid. So it's very quick, very simple to figure that out. If you want to know how to protect yourself, some people say that you can get lien lease waivers you can request that from your contractor and or their subs. So when they finish work, they sign off and say, I've been paid, and I will not file a lien release against you. So the guys I paid, I made them agree to that, so that they're not going to come back and go, oh, yeah, he never actually paid me for this as well. So this is all you get, and then you're good to go. Does that answer your question?
What's it called? Lien
Lease waiver affidavit. You can look them up. Lien release. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Next one. Yeah, great question. So how did you manage to pay the mortgage, keep it afloat when all this was going down? And so the loan had 1 year of interest only, right? And so that's pretty good. You don't have to pay principal. That's usually what they do on bigger loans, so you can do this, stabilize, right? And having the income from the 4 unit was able to actually cover it. We got lucky because tax appraisal, we actually were able to argue it down 2 years in a row, and so we didn't get a huge tax bill until this year. And that was actually, all right, so sidebar, that was actually one of our problems because the first year, we had them argue the tax appraisal. We bought it for $320,000. Somehow they argued it down to $190,000 was what they said to HCAT what it's worth. The problem was, if our rehab is over 50% of $190,000, technically we should be doing new construction. Even though, we're all kind of looking at each other, we know it's not worth $190,000. Technically, we probably should have done new construction. But so that's the answer, is that's why it's also good for multifamily. Have other units running, right? And also give yourself a buffer. So give yourself a year of interest-only low payments. Yeah, another one here.
I've been a part of a couple of rehabs before, and I've gotten these reviews from contractors to where if I should be present when some of the inspections are being done. I was in a position just like you before to where we had already done some work, and there was no permit for that. And so I wanted to pick your brain as to, would you recommend, based on that individual experience, to be present on that inspection?
Yeah, really good question is saying, hey, if I got a GC or I got a contractor doing work, when they are doing the inspections, should I be there for them in the city? I actually would say, I am inclined to say no, because when you're there, sometimes they might the city inspector could try to do whatever, could try to show their metal, et cetera. And sometimes when they're just there with the contractor, they usually can figure things out, And the contractor can also blame you if they need to, quite honestly. They're like, yeah, this guy, he's trying to cut corners, I'll talk to him, and they think now they're partners. So honestly, that's what I had, unless for the structural or some where I knew it was very delicate, I made sure I was there. But for the others, I let the trades do it, because usually they can kind of figure it out. All right, I think we have one more. Lucas says one more question. Who's got the last question of the night? Yeah.
Looking back, you encountered some problems.
Yeah.
Did you get an inspection before you purchased it?
Uh-huh.
Did you consider those problems into your
Yeah, so she asked, there's a lot of problems. Do we have inspection beforehand? Do we consider that? Absolutely. So we got an inspection, a general inspection, and that's when they said, hey, the foundation might be a little off. So I got a structural engineer that followed up. He said there's termite damage. So I got 3 termite companies to come in and give me a quote. He said the roof's a little off. So I got 3 roofing companies come in and give me a quote. So that's why those first couple I listed as, they weren't surprises. They were just issues. But absolutely. So I'd say get a general, and if you need to, follow up and get at least 3 quotes on all the big ticket items before you go in. And don't be afraid, like I said, to put a little contingency on the big ticket item, and ask for that from the seller before you close. All right, I think that's it. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
All right, everybody, give it up for Dan. Nice job. Killed it. All right, I promise I am the very last person you will hear speaking up here tonight. I'm Trevor. I'm the lead wealth coach up here at TWA. Who here is not a member yet? Come on, raise your hand high. This is for you. For everybody that is not a member yet and you want to take Steve's class and join the membership, we are doing that for $400 tonight. So that will get you the Saturday class with Steve, and that will get you our 2-year membership for $400. If you want to join up, we've got our kiosk set up right behind the bar where we will all get dismissed to now. Thank you all very much for coming out tonight. We'll see y'all at the bar. Thank you.